everyone, and welcome to Free Your Mind Friday. I'm Dr. Napasha Gettings, and this Friday we are going to continue the conversation that we already started about abuse. I want to remind everyone that abuse can affect us in childhood on into adulthood. So even though April is National Child Abuse Awareness Month, I don't want anyone to think that if you're no longer in childhood, these messages don't apply to you, because they very much do. I work with a lot of adults who are highly affected by their upbringing, and I don't know that any of us are exempt from being affected by our upbringing. Obviously, if we were afforded the opportunity to grow up in environments where stress levels are low, how our childhood has affected us is probably positive. Those of us who grew up in environments with toxic stress levels, we also are affected by that exposure as children. So as I went through medical school and pursued a specialty training in child and adolescent psychiatry, I must say that it wasn't just the topic itself that interested me, but it was also the fact that a lot of the conditions that we treat in mental health, I myself have experienced. And I don't always share my personal childhood story. However, I'm a strong believer that if you can share with someone what you've overcome and help them to explore opportunities by which they themselves can overcome their own struggles, then I think you're winning. So I would like to let the community know and my followers know that I grew up in a home with what we might consider in medicine chronic toxic stress. And I want everyone to remember that term, toxic stress, because as we've already covered, our brain, our central nervous system, is the receptor for all the stimuli that we receive around us. And so if that stimuli happens to be a stressor or a stressful stimuli that is repeated over time, it can have significant effects on the developing brain. I wanted to talk about abuse as a way to introduce everyone to parts of the brain. One thing that I'm really passionate about is education, and I know that when I went through school, I didn't learn very much about brain function or brain development. I find it too often that most people don't even know the names of different organs in their body, let alone what they do. And so I would love for this platform to be a place where you can come and learn more about not only the developing brain, but also other parts of the human body and how they all work together in an integrated system. So when we're exposed to toxic stress, there are certain parts of our body that have to respond because we are innately designed to do so. So one of the areas of the brain that is highly involved when it comes to our stress response is the hippocampus. The hippocampus is the part of our brain that's responsible for memory, and its job is to store experiences, to store information that will allow us to be equipped to protect ourselves in the face of danger. It also communicates with an area of the brain known as the amygdala, and together they both work to navigate our way through the world, store information, and develop an appropriate response to certain stimuli. So I'd like everybody to think for a moment, what if you have a child that is chronically exposed to a parent who abuses substances, or a child who is chronically exposed to domestic violence? Or how about emotional abuse? I would like to take the next few weeks to really explore and expand our knowledge base on certain types of abuse, because they do have different effects on the brain. But one circuit that you can be sure all types of abuse can affect in the body is our stress response circuit. And that circuit involves not only structures in the brain, but also structures in other areas of our bodies, like our adrenal glands. So for those of you who don't know, our adrenal glands are two glands that sit adjacent to our kidneys. And a huge part of their role and function in the body is to respond to stress. They, in concert with the brain, make chemicals like adrenaline. Another chemical in the body that is elevated when we are underneath a lot of stress is cortisol. So those two substances, adrenaline and cortisol, play a huge role in us learning how to be aware of the environment around us, responding appropriately when in the face of danger. Now, I'm sure you can imagine that if you grew up in a healthy household where there is some stress, but it is not chronic or high levels of stress, you tap into this circuit when necessary. However, when we are raised in environments where the stress is always there, that means that your fight or flight system, your adrenals, your hypothalamus, and your pituitary gland, which both are within the brain, they communicate with each other constantly, and it affects the levels of certain chemicals that are produced in the body. And I'm going to talk in further videos about how these stress hormones, as many people know them to be, affect brain development over time. There's a lot of research that shows that children who are exposed to chronic stress, whether it's emotional, physical, or sexual abuse, over time can have smaller structures develop in their brain, like the corpus callosum, even the cerebellum, which is known to help with coordination and movement. There are lots of functional MRIs now that we have available to image and measure the size and volume of certain areas of the brain and to compare it to those individuals who have grown up in toxic stress. And what has been found is that certain structures actually don't develop to the degree in which they can, and they don't function properly. One area that's really interesting is, again, the amygdala. I've explained before that the amygdala is within the brain, and its job basically is to identify danger. Where over time, if you are constantly exposed to dangerous or high toxic levels of stress, this area of the brain becomes what we call hyper alert, which means you are susceptible to hyperarousal, to not trusting very easily, not trusting your environment. A lot of times what we see in adulthood with individuals who have been subjected to abuse is that they don't trust individuals. They are always on high alert for potentially being harmed. And it's because of how they were raised. It makes it challenging sometimes to develop healthy relationships when you are a survivor of trauma. And so I work with a lot of couples and a lot of individuals. We also provide family therapy, because one thing that I find to be crucial is that when you are a survivor of trauma or abuse, that you don't pass on that to the next generation. I touched on that a little bit last Friday, and I want to explain what I mean by that. Sometimes when we are survivors of abuse and trauma, it's easy for us to go on and repeat those same patterns of engaging with others in relationships. We can become the abusive parent, whether it be emotional or verbal abuse. I think sometimes people don't understand the impact that our words have on the developing mind. And I see that a lot in the clinic. Young women and young men who come in and their self-esteem is highly damaged because of the words that they heard growing up. They've literally internalized an abusive voice and now have become their own worst enemy. And so just this past week, for those of you who were able to check it out, I was a guest on a podcast, FSLers with Jennifer Connect, and we talked about empowerment, and we talked about what she refers to as the mean girl voice, or what I refer to as negative Nelly. But in a lot of cases of children and adults with abuse, that voice is the voice of your abuser, and you've now adopted it as your own. And so a lot of times, even when we're no longer in an abusive situation, we can't see our own self-worth. We can't see beyond the perspective that we have been given over time. And so I want to share with everyone today that it is possible to push past the effects of abuse. If we start to understand specifically how abuse affects the body, I think that it will help a lot of us create more of an awareness and equip ourselves to do something about it, and also to change the cycle. Over the course of the next week, we are going to cover in specifics the effects on the brain of emotional abuse, physical abuse, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, and trauma. I'm going to make sure that when you walk away from these videos, you're able to understand and recognize some of the patterns in others and also in yourself. It takes awareness in order to make change. We can't walk blindly through life repeating the same tragic cycles and not being aware of the damage that we cause ourselves and our offspring. I'm a mother. I actually became a mother at a very young age, and I've had to learn over time myself how to implement healthy parenting strategies in raising my own children. And I'm here to help parents as well. I'm also here to help adults who are survivors of abuse and haven't addressed it. You have to address it in the most healthy way possible. And seeing a mental health professional may not be the route for everyone, but I highly recommend that if it's something that you have put off because of stigma or worrying about being judged or seeming lesser than, or feeling as though admitting to the effects of abuse somehow makes you weak. And here I'm really talking to our men, because in our society, certain emotions are shunned when it comes to gender. And a lot of men, unfortunately, suffer in silence because of abuse that they've endured, because they are, again, running from shame. The shame that we as a society place upon individuals telling their truth. Without having your truth, you have nothing. If you can't face it, walk in it, admit it, and make it a testimony, you have not healed. And this is something that I know personally, and I want to make sure that I share it with everyone as a professional. I want you to visit my website, clarionConscience.com. Make yourself aware of this movement. Make yourself aware of mental health strategies and tips that you can use to ensure overall mind-body wellness. That's my passion. That's why I'm coming here every week for Free Your Mind Friday. I want us to become familiar with these brain terms. I don't want it to sound like a foreign language. My major goal long term is that this is taught in schools. We should understand this as we are being educated in the school system. Why go to school and learn about all these different topics, but you don't even understand or know how your body works? It makes no sense to me. So I'm here to help you, and I want to encourage you to pass along a healthy message. Please do follow me on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Natasha T. Gettings. I make sure that I post information that you can use. And please do visit the website, clarionConscience.com, so that you can watch previous videos that have been recorded and uploaded. Share with your community. I want to make sure that this is a group effort. And lastly, I would like anyone who is brave enough and would want to help another person to share their testimony on social media of how they've overcome abuse, how it has impacted their life. If you have any questions or any specifics related to this topic that you would like to see me speak on, please do leave it in the comments. We're going to create an area on the website where you're able to leave your story of abuse and share with us how it has affected you in adulthood. Share with us how you overcame it. I want this to be an ongoing conversation, and I want you to be able to have a clear conscience. Thank you, and be well.